This is a brief version of the on-screen disclaimer. This channel shares my personal memories and perspectives as accurately as I can recall them, supported by my own records where possible. Names and identifying details have been changed for privacy and safety. This content is for educational and healing purposes only. Some material may be difficult. Please take care of yourself and seek support if needed. Breaking the chain when house rules become prison bars. Copyright 2025, Happily Ever After Abuse.com. All rights reserved. Narrated by Delisha Brown for Happily Ever After Abuse. Before beginning, take one calm, steady breath. Feel your shoulders lower. This is not a story about pain returning. It is a story about understanding what control looked like and why it no longer lives here. Part 1. The Rule. For as long as I could remember, Isis and Suchus never voluntarily used our house phone. It wasn't by accident. It was a deeply entrenched house rule, one they instinctively obeyed. So automatic was their compliance that they subconsciously ignored the sound of the phone ringing altogether. As the late psychologist Dr. Evan Stark described in his 2007 book, Coercive Control, abusers often govern small everyday behaviors to reinforce dominance. Over time, these micro rules conditioned families to equate obedience with safety. In our home, the phone symbolized hierarchy and fear. It wasn't just a device, it was a reminder that power belonged elsewhere. Part 2. The Required Calls. Despite that unspoken fear, my children were required to use that very phone for one recurring purpose: to participate in scheduled conversations with their paternal grandparents, Philly and Millie. The pattern never changed. Dolus would begin feverishly texting on his cell phone, and I learned to read his pauses. When the gaps between messages grew long, I knew he was communicating with one or both of his parents. Then, with dreadful knowing, I would brace myself for his next words. He would summon them by announcing that their Mima, Millie, and Papa, Philly, were about to call them. Without fail, Isis and Suchus immediately stopped whatever they were doing and appeared before Dolus. They had learned from earlier lectures and punishments that any delay in answering was a blatant display of disrespect towards their elders. The ritual had become reflex. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network notes that children in controlling homes internalize compliance so completely that it becomes a form of automatic self-protection, what psychologists call anticipatory obedience. Part 2. Scripted Conversations. Every call followed the same pattern. Dolus would either have the children wait for an incoming call on the house phone, or he would dial Millie's number himself before handing the receiver to our daughter, Isis. Regardless of who initiated the call, the sequence never changed. Isis always spoke first. Millie and Philly's tone was coldly polite, their conversation short, perhaps a few minutes of small talk before moving on. Then Isis, still required to remain in place, would hand the phone to Suchus. That handoff always triggered laughter and adoration from the other end of the line. Suddenly, voices once restrained became warm and enthusiastic, praising, encouraging, elevating. Dr. Judith Herman explains that in abusive systems, children are often assigned emotional roles that divide them: the golden child who receives conditional affection, and the scapegoat who absorbs blame. Both roles are forms of manipulation, binding loyalty through inequality. Part 4: The Turning Point. After that Valentine's Day, our day of liberation, I made a vow my children would never again be forced into those phone calls. Dolus had underestimated the permanence of my decision. His rule book no longer applied. But freedom does not erase persistence. 2 weeks after his departure, Dolus began making uncomfortable requests, demands that revealed how control tries to survive absence. He asked that I either sell our home quickly or refinance it in my name. He also instructed me to organize and maintain phone communication between his parents and our children. Dr. Ramani Durvasula calls this post-separation abuse, when an abuser attempts to retain psychological authority through ongoing instructions or expectations. On February 25th, 2021, I received a text message from Dolus. He wanted me to begin facilitating phone calls between the children and his parents. My reply was brief but firm. Quote, I prefer that your parents call the children. They have called them before. We are all adults, and Isis and Suchus are their grandchildren. I honestly prefer not to be your parents' facilitator, given their role in our troubled marriage. Unquote. The next morning, his response arrived. In a show of grace, Dolus proclaimed that he chose not to respond to my message the previous evening because he was slightly annoyed with its contents. Then, shifting blame, he accused me of failing to embrace the role of facilitator while knowing that when he called the house phone, no one answered. If I were to respond today with the clarity freedom brings, I would write back simply, of course no one would answer the phone. Doing so would be against the house rules. Let us reflect. In that moment, liberation didn't look like defiance. It looked like stillness. The same rule that enforced submission collapsed under its own contradiction. Dr. Shahida Arabi writes that survivors reclaim freedom not by seeking confrontation, but by choosing alignment with peace. Refusal becomes affirmation. That text exchange, as simple as it was, represented the final unraveling of control. It all came full circle. The house phone rule that once silenced my family ended by its own absurd logic. In refusing to obey, I didn't create conflict, I ended it. Sincere thoughts from me to you. Every word of this narrative is true to the events that unfolded 2 weeks after February 14th, 2021. Nothing more, nothing less. The phone, the texts, the obedience, and the irony are factual. The rule ended not with confrontation, but with recognition. I share this story for every survivor who still measures peace by the absence of noise. May they learn that silence is not fear, it is ownership.